Hi, I'm Nicholas O'Brien. I'm the founder and director of Essay Games. Thanks so much for having me here. It was kind of a harrowing journey for me yesterday, as a lot of other people, but I'm super glad to be here. Um, I'm here to present a talk called Inviting the Player to Practice Positive Self-Talk as it relates to my upcoming narrative minigame anthology project called Bundle of Joy. I'm going to take off my mask. Sorry, I forgot to do that. Hi. Okay, let's see. Great. So Bundle of Joy is based on my personal experience of becoming a parent during the start of the pandemic. The game is structured into days where the player dad is woken up early by their infant's cries and thrust into a chaotic turmoil of childcare. So you're asked to perform seemingly simple tasks like putting on socks, rocking the baby back to sleep, and cleaning up after meals. But while executing these tasks, you're constantly racing against the clock of your own mounting stress. If the player's stress meter fills up or stresses out, then they take a break as their partner takes over. You recenter yourself, steel yourself, and then go back into the fray. After a couple rounds of minigames, the player can take some downtime during baby's nap and recover stress while exploring some of the protagonist's backstory. Downtime also allows you to reconnect with your partner and discover the ways in which they too are being affected by parenthood. At the end of the day, before settling in for restless sleep, the player is asked to reflect and take notes on their parenting. The game records how many tasks were completed, and if the player is stressed out during the day. There's a bug there. You can't complete more than 6 tasks, but don't worry about it. When the player completes their journal entry and submits their thoughts on the day, the game responds to their input text and offers some friendly, supportive, and encouraging feedback based on their input. I'm making Bundle of Joy because when I was first preparing to be a father, I found it odd that almost all of the literature that I read, there was actually a noticeable gap of information regarding the 0 to 6 month time frame. What I soon realized is that after my child was born, that the reason for this is because that for the most part, parents are just trying to survive. They're trying to sleep, they're trying to care for their child, they're trying to make sense of the chaos, they're trying not to be overwhelmed, they're trying to negotiate all of the new feelings that come from having a newborn. And nothing can properly prepare you for all of these changes. No amount of literature can encapsulate the emotional changes that happen in these early months. And when I became a new father, I was completing my previous game, The Last Survey, which is an experimental hand-drawn visual novel about supply chains and navigating large systems of power. My daughter was just under 6 months old when this game was finished, and afterwards I became the primary source of childcare for my family during the Omicron spike in the winter of 2020-21. My partner, who had returned to work just after 6 weeks of maternity leave, punishingly short amount of time in my opinion, we struggled during this time to figure out if our sense of isolation was the result of the pandemic or a result of having a newborn. During that time, I became quite self-critical of my parenting and my parenting abilities. When I wanted to be working on my next project or spending time in the studio, which looked like this during the pandemic, instead of taking care of my family, I was racked with an immense sense of guilt. This combined with my early struggle to bond with my child, which I now know can be a common occurrence for a lot of different parents, this made me wonder if I was even capable of being a good father. Even amidst the good times of tickles and cuddles with my infant daughter, I couldn't help but feel like I wasn't doing enough for them, and that my desire to maintain a sense of autonomy separate from my child and my partner was ultimately selfish. It wasn't until the next summer, when I started meeting other parents in the park, that I realized these feelings were actually quite common, and that the guilt and pressure I was feeling was all self-inflicted. I started to actively practice positive self-talk and frequently reminded myself that being myself and allowing myself to feel all the feelings that I was feeling that emerge from this life-altering process would ultimately give me the space to be my best dad self. Though my personal journey hasn't been the smoothest and one that I continue to struggle with, this weekend, while my partner is masterfully juggling 2 kiddos at home, solo, I tried to maintain an active habit of reminding myself and communicating to my partner that I've got this. And bless her heart, she literally texted me that right before coming up on stage. So like any semi-self-indulged artist, right, I wondered how I could capture this journey into a creative experience. I wondered how a video game might be at least a way of broaching the moment of early childhood that I saw so absent from my father-to-be research. At the very least, I speculated if I could create something for myself to create just an ounce of catharsis for the difficult and unexpected experiences that I had. And this is actually a screenshot from a very early prototype of the experience that I completely scratched. So when the player submits the reflections that you saw earlier at the end of the day, the game reads the journal entry for key words and phrases. Some of them are listed here. If the player's entry appears particularly negative, the game's narrator tries to remind the player that they're doing their best, and that as a new parent, that's often all you can do. The narrator says, "Hey, I know it's maybe been a hard day, but you don't need to be so hard on yourself. Having one tough day doesn't mean you can't do something. Taking care of the kiddo is hard enough. Try practicing some positive self-talk. It might not seem like it makes a difference, but promise that you'll try. You've got this, even if you feel like you don't right now. Keep going. You're doing great. See you in the morning." So if the player continues to use negative language on the following day, the narrator continues to encourage the player to practice positive self-talk by recommending alternative phrasing. The game's narrator might point out that the player is using a filtering method, which is amplifying the negative aspects and not focusing on what they actually did accomplish during the day. Additionally, the narrator might remind you that when you took downtime for yourself or your partner, you weren't able to complete everything, but that it's important that you had that moment. And that's a popular kind of positive self-talk tactic. The game reminds the player that harping on negative performance can negatively impact their ability to recover stress during downtime, which is a mechanical implementation that I'm still trying to negotiate. The player is also given an in-game item that allows the players to overcome mini-games that pose particular challenges to the player and prevent stressing out or reaching a breaking point where the player no longer has any additional stress to give. And this is kind of a prototype of that mechanic. Though the game's narrator is the central encouraging force, the game's low poly and rough around the edges aesthetic are intentionally designed to bring a lighthearted and humorous touch to the heavy and emotionally charged space of childcare and the ongoing traumas that were inflicted by the pandemic. Creating a fun, if at times stressful experience also encourages you or the player to laugh at their own failures. And I wanted to design a game where even if things go awry, the player still feels like they're enjoying themselves. And I don't mean in like a Souls-like glutton for punishment kind of way. So kind of to wrap up, it should be noted that even though in the game you play as dad, Bundle of Joy is intended for everyone. It's built to be an inclusive experience, not just about parenting, but also about finding yourself, dealing with self-doubt, overcoming imposter syndrome, and becoming a more supportive partner, and more importantly, reminding yourself that your best is more than good enough. By inviting the player to practice positive self-talk narratively and mechanically, I'm trying to design an experience that stands in direct opposition to mainstream gamer bro culture. Toxic masculinity has inflicted so much on our society, particularly in games. And I hope that Bundle of Joy reminds dads of all stripes and kinds that the first step in undoing the stigmas and misconceptions of our times has to start with being kind to yourself. Without taking care of yourself, there's no way that you'll be able to take care of others, especially your new little bundle of joy. Thanks so much. Hi. I'll take questions. I think that that's allowed. Yes. Cool. Yeah. 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 Yeah, there's no shotguns in Bundle of Joy. Uh, there's not really like multiple outcomes. As you progress through the game and you go through daily cycles, the mini games get progressively more difficult. So even though you might, in the first couple of times that you experience a mini game, the game allows you to become familiar and to build some confidence, and then that confidence is broken down by the game adding new elements and variables that create a little bit more chaos and challenge. So it's not necessarily multiple outcomes like non-linearly, but the game progresses in a way where the challenges get a little bit more intense. Yeah, actually, this is a great point. The challenges are, a lot of the incremental challenges are that the child starts to react to what you're attempting to do and makes it a little bit more difficult. Yeah. 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 Yeah, that's a really good question. Absolutely. Thank you for the reminder. The question is about how to balance what type of positive self-talk to try to reinforce to the player and what lines I feel comfortable kind of dancing on, if you will, of being able to tell the player how to feel in a certain way. Is that a good summary? Cool. I think that the way that I'm trying to design around that is basically by making it that the positive self-talk encouragement is only triggered when the player is being particularly negative. So it's not insistent that you have to practice that kind of positivity unless you're actively exercising the opposite. So I hope that that's a way that I'm kind of designing around that. Another way that I'm trying to do that is really trying to use a light touch, right? Not saying things like, not trying to get too much in the weeds of the psychology of practicing positive self-talk, but just like peppering in every once in a while moments to encourage the player that what they're doing is right? What they're doing is correct. Even if they stress out, even if they fail a mini game, or even if they have to take a break, right? That all of those things are correct, right? All of those things are part of the process of trying to take care of an infant child, right? So I think I'm trying to reinforce that by just reminding the player that even if they feel like they're making mistakes or failure, that that's like baked into the experience, and that actually through failure, you're kind of exposing yourself to more aspects of the gameplay. This is a great question, though. Another way of answering that question is saying, I don't know. Like, I very honestly, I think that that'll come out like the more that I get playtesting and the more that people are saying like, I don't like the way you're talking to me, then I'll really have to revisit it. Yeah, last one. No. The question was, am I worried about players not typing in anything? And my answer to that is no. Are you? Cool. I I'm sorry, I don't mean to be glib. I parenting is hard and gameplay is hard, and I like the game is already a stressful experience, so I don't want to add more stress. So if a player decides to voluntarily not participate in that aspect of the game, then that should be their choice. Yeah, I think that that's like I'm okay and comfortable with that. I guess it's something that I maybe haven't addressed is that when you do input that stuff into the game not only reads it and interprets it, but it also saves it onto your desktop as a local file. I'm still trying to negotiate how I feel about sharing that stuff with other people and maybe creating a networked experience about the input that you're putting into that like last journal entry. I like have kind of there's like ethical gray areas there for me. So yeah, I think that like over time when you're like reintroduced with that mechanic multiple times, I'm just hoping that like, okay, it's the end of the day, it's journal time, that even if the player is like, no, I don't want to participate in this, like that's okay. Cool. Oh, I spaced out there because I was thinking about that. Okay, thank you so much.